Had to be on our ship at 7 o'clock. It's 6:45. My chief petty officer's over the bow of the ship looking for me. He says, "Ichabod, is that you?" I said, "Yeah, Chief, what's up?" "The XO wants to see you in his quarters immediately." So I went walking up to his quarters, knocked. He said, "Enter." I said, "Yes, sir, you wanted to see me?" He said, "Ichabod, what do you know about this?" And he threw this letter across his desk at me. The XO, I'm reading it, and the XO screamed, "What do you know about this? What do you know about this?" I said, "Sir, I know nothing about it." He said, "Get the fuck out of here."
Ken and Corvati had joined the Navy hoping to stay out of Vietnam. A letter from a congressman changed his orders within a day and began a chain of consequences he would spend the rest of his life tracing backward. From Veterans Voices of Newton, this is the crux of it. To understand that letter, go back to Newton in 1966. Ken was against the war, worried about the draft, and trying to preserve whatever control he could over what came next.
I grew up in an Italian family, just about a half mile away from the post. Lived there most of my life. Went to Newton schools, went to Newton North High School, graduated there. This was graduated in 66. Well, that was a time when the Vietnam War was kind of roaring, right, back then. So, graduated from high school, didn't want to go to war, was very much against the war at that time. Me and my best friend, so we decided to go to Newton Junior College. I mean, it was kind of a rigged system back then because either you went to college or you went to war. I mean, there was no two ways about it. If you had money, you went to college. If you didn't have money, you were going to get drafted. So we went to Newton Junior College, which wasn't an expensive college. But we showed up late for class one day. We had this Professor Hybels, was his name. I remember it. It was a sociology class. So we were trying to open the door, and we found some resistance, and he was tugging on the other end, and he slammed the door shut. So we thought, okay, we're going to get thrown out of school, and we're going to get drafted. So we decided to join the Navy together, and we joined the Navy on the buddy system. If I got drafted, that was sure Nam. You were going to go in the Army, even if it was maybe only 2 years, but you're going to go to Nam. Didn't want to go to Nam, that's why we joined the Navy. It turned out I ended up going anyways. It's just one of those things. We got out of boot camp. He got sent to a flagship in Italy for 3 years. I got sent to an LST, that's a tank landing ship, down at Little Creek, Virginia, on the East Coast. And could have been fat, dumb, and happy there for 4 years, because once you were on that ship, you never really got off it. You were on the East Coast, and, would have been safe. And I remember the first cruise we went on, I was seasick for 11 days, because the ship was always rolling. You had to do your 8 hours work, plus stand 2 watches, 2 4-hour watches, okay? And so me being an electrician, the watches I stood were in the engine room, trying to keep these generators in sync. There were like 3 generators, and you had these controls, and you'd watch them, the RPMs, and just keeping them in sync all the time and stuff like that. But there was bilge water down below, okay? So you always saw the bilge water sloshing back and forth, and it just added to the seasickness. And the Navy didn't consider seasickness a sickness. You still had to work through it, The only relief you got when you're that sick is to lie down. But I remember I was so hungry because I couldn't eat anything. I'd go up to the chow line and I'd get my food, and I'd sit down at the table, and the table had these blockers. They put blockers on the table so the trays wouldn't fly off, you know what I mean? Because the ship was always rolling. And I'd put the tray down, I'd look at the food, and I'd see it sloshing around. I'd say, I can't eat it. I can't eat it. So after about 4 or 5 days, I started eating crackers. I could get crackers now. Then I graduated to little pieces of fruit, whatever. After 11 days, I finally got my sea legs, and it was okay after that. For the time I was in the Navy, it was okay. But once you get over it, you see other people go through it too, But that was a fun experience. No, I'm just being facetious now.
For almost 2 years, Ken worked in the ship's electrical crew without formal technical training. Then, during a weekend home, his father made an offer.
And after 2 years, I was home on a weekend liberty. My dad was a professional musician, and he played piano. And he played at various clubs around here, clubs in Boston and what have you. One weekend he says, Ken, I'm getting to know this Congressman, Philbin. I'm getting to know him pretty well. He comes to see me play every Friday night, and we're getting kind of friendly. Do you want me to ask him if he can do anything about getting a school for you? And I said, okay, Dad, but from here on out, I know nothing about it. I said, do you understand what I'm saying? I know nothing about the situation. He said, okay, I got it. So about 3 months later, I was coming back off a weekend liberty. Had to be on our ship at 7 o'clock. It's 7:15. My chief petty officer's over the bow of the ship looking for me. He says, Ichabodi, is that you? I said, yeah, Chief, what's up? The XO wants to see you in his quarters immediately. So I went walking up to his quarters, knocked. He said, enter. I said, yes, sir, you wanted to see me? He said, Ichabodi, what do you know about this? And he threw this letter across his desk at me. And it was from this Congressman Philbin. And the first paragraph went on to say how he knew my dad and what a great guy he was and all this stuff. The second paragraph went something like, unfortunately Ken wasn't able to get a school out of boot camp. And the third paragraph went something like, I'd like you to look into this matter. If you can't, I'll have to seek other means. It was kind of like an innuendo, like a subtle threat. And in the meantime, the XO, I'm reading it, and the XO screamed, what do you know about this? What do you know about this? I said, sir, I know nothing about it. He said, get the fuck out of here.
Ken had not gone through his Navy chain of command. His father had gone to a congressman. Ken came to believe that what followed was punishment. Whatever the Navy's official reasoning, he never returned to the ship.
My orders were cut 24 hours later. I was on my way to Great Lakes. I was up there for a year going to school. Never going to go back to that ship again. My orders came through. They were for SERE training. That's S-E-R-E. You can actually look that up or Google it. It's Survival, Escape, Evasion, and Resistance Training. And I trained with the Marines for about a month. And then I got my orders for Vietnam.
The new path took Ken to school at Great Lakes, and then to SERE, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape Training, designed to prepare service members for capture and hostile conditions.
Well, this SERE training I was talking about, it was training for a lot of guys going in country so that if they're in a situation like that, they knew what to do. I mean, it's kind of like jungle training. What do you do in these certain situations? There was some weapons training and, stuff like that. I mean, I never shot an M60 machine gun before, but I fired one in SERE training, you know what I mean? There was classroom stuff about Vietnam. There was physical, stuff like running. And then there was escape and invasion part where they let a bunch of us in the woods and we had to survive on our own, no food. So we're out there for days. And then there was 4 groups of about 8 guys, okay? And we had to try to catch fish. There was a little pond, but we didn't have any fish hooks or anything like that. And then there was a little path and there were 2 white chickens on the path, I guess, that they let loose for us to catch. So we're running around trying to catch these chickens. We're starving, running around trying to catch these chickens. And me being from where I am, when they caught them, I said, what do we do with them? The guys from the south just grabbed them by the neck and just ripped their necks off, and we made soup, which could feed the most guys, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. So there was evasion training. They let us out. We're out in the woods, and we had to hide from the enemy. And we were on our own. Well, they ended up catching all of us. But when they caught us, they put us in a prison camp. Barbed wire, machine guns, the whole 9 yards. This was tough. A lot of guys didn't survive this very well. They had these, a couple of pits of water, okay, probably about 12 inches deep. It was stinky and whatever. They'd made us roll in it, and do all this stuff. They had there was actually a captain that went through this with us, and they put him in a tube and had a siren blasting, for a couple of hours, on this guy. They would call out about 4 guys at a time. And they put us in these boxes. And there were small boxes you had to crunch down. They'd close the cover. You'd stay in there for a few hours. And then you could hear guys screaming, yelling. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, those are real good tapes, Turns out they weren't tapes. When they called my number out, and you went into a hut. I went into one. And there was a big dude, and there was a smaller guy. And he says, look, You tell me what I want to know, and you'll be okay. If you don't, I'm going to let him take care of you. What's your name? And I did the military thing. I said, Enkovati Kenneth Victor. So the guy starts slapping me across the face. Bam, bam, bam. That's not what I asked you. What's your name? I said the same thing, you know. So he said, all right. And he motioned to the guy. The guy came over. He pinned my shoulders up against the wall. He got his thumbs and he put them up underneath my ribs. For whatever reason, I didn't let out a whimper, and when he was done, I just dropped to the ground. It was wicked, painful, and he said to me, nice going. Do you want a cigarette? And I didn't say anything, and he said, if the enemy offers you something, take it. And so I said, okay, I'll have a cigarette, you know, because I smoked back then. It was hot, and they had guys going around picking up pine needles, one by one, and putting them in a barrel. That's what they were doing. And when the barrel was getting near full, they'd just tip it over again. They'd have to start all over again. So it was mental torture. There was some physical stuff. One of the guys actually ruptured my eardrum because we had these number tags on, but the number was only on one side of the tag. So this guy come up to me and he just whap, you know, and he caught my ear because my tag, he couldn't see my number, okay, because it was on the wrong side. So he ruptured my eardrum. Actually, when I got to Vietnam, they were thinking about medevacing me to Japan. I was hoping, you know, but no, they took care of it there. So that was a learning experience. Not too many guys go through something like that, you know, and I'll never forget it.
The training ended. The orders did not.
When I got my orders, to be honest with you, for a couple of days I didn't tell anybody. I really didn't know what I was going to do, and then I thought about it. I said, just do it, just go with it, you know, and I did. I just followed orders and went to Vietnam. I was thinking about not going. I could have taken off to Canada. Some guys were doing that, but I thought about it and said, no, I can't do that. I gotta go.
Ken's answer refuses a simpler story. He did not come to believe the war was right. He came to believe that serving and supporting the war were not the same thing.
No, I don't regret my military service. Why should I regret it? I'm proud of it. I did it. I did what I had to do. No, I didn't like the war. No, absolutely. I hated the war. I was against the war. But I wanted to survive like anybody else. So I just did what I had to do.
In August of 1970, Ken arrived at the Naval Support Facility at Cam Ranh Bay. The base was comparatively secure, but the first thing he carried into it was fear.
When I first landed in Vietnam, a couple of guys picked me up. We're driving to my base, the Naval Support Facility in Cam Ranh Bay. One of the guys on the truck says, hey, I know a shortcut. When he said that, I'm thinking, oh, that's it. We're going to get killed. You know what I mean? Shortcut. Don't take a shortcut. Stay on the main road. You know, this was all those thoughts. This is what I was thinking. You know, for a while, you know, you didn't want to pick up a can because you thought it might be booby-trapped or something. You didn't know what the hell was going on. Like I said, it's just a crazy time. It took maybe a couple of months to kind of settle in once you were there. It took a little while. But after that, it was kind of okay. Yeah, so I went to Vietnam. Showed up at Cam Ranh Bay, South Vietnam. When I showed up, they weren't even expecting me. They said, what are you doing here? We're looking for another guy. I said, hey, I'm just going where they told me to go, you know, so. But the bottom line was, that was punishment for going outside the chain of command, okay? That's what happened. But there was some good that came out of it. They had an Onan generator shop. Onan was the manufacturer of these 3 and 6 kilowatt generators, and they were on the Swift boats. We'd overhaul them and get them ready, get them back out to the guys on the AFIBs. And did that for about a year. While I was there, Cam Ranh was one of the safer places to be in Vietnam. There's about 500 Navy guys there, you know, and it's kind of unusual for a Navy guy to be in country, but yeah, I was in country for a year.
Cam Ranh was a base, not a single scene. Ken remembers fear, work, heat, recreation, and absurdity living beside one another.
Every 3 days you had to stand an 8-hour watch. There was like a water tower watch, which was at the highest point on the base, you know, where the water tower was. And you'd be up there with your M16 and your canteen and a radio, and every 15 minutes they'd radio just to see if you were still there. There was another watch on the beach where they had a little tower and a light you had to shine on the beach for, you know, every 15 minutes or so. We had a softball field, night lights, dugouts, and we had 2 leagues. We used to play softball all the time. And the Vietnamese never saw softball. But they love to see someone hit a ball over the fence. Okay, they really got excited about that. So no kidding, I had a few of my own fans that used to come out and see me play because I led both leagues in home runs. I was a pretty good athlete when I was a kid. When you're on watch sometimes, like up at this water tower watch, you know, you're up there with your M16 and your canteen and the radio, and all of a sudden you'd hear, "Fuck you, fuck you." And I'd say to myself, what am I doing here? You know, I mean, I'm in this godforsaken place. People want to kill me. I got things out there saying, "Fuck you." So, here it is. The Tokay lizard. Fuck you, lizard. So yeah, so, you know, just add to insult to injury, you know, you're up there on a watch and think, you know, and you say, what am I doing here? This place is insane, you know what I mean? It just added to the insanity, you know.
One of the most important consequences began before Ken ever reached Vietnam. Before development, he received 30 days of leave.
Well, another thing that happened too, because of going to Vietnam, before you went over, they gave you a 30-day leave. My father and my uncle owned a little hunting lodge up in Middleton, New Hampshire someplace. It was on a dirt road at the base of a little mountain. You know, it was all by itself. So me and a bunch of guys from here, there was about 4 of us, we went up there just for the weekend. And so we're driving around and we went to this place on Lake Winnipesaukee. And we walked in, there's a couple of girls playing pool. And so me and another guy said, "Hey, you mind if we play with you?" And they said, "Okay." So we ended up spending the better part of the afternoon, you know, with them, playing pool, fooling around. And we walked outside. And so I'm with one girl, and my buddy's with the other girl. And so I said to the girl I was with, I said, "Hey, do you mind if we switch?" And she says, "No, I don't mind." I ended up marrying that girl. That's how I met my wife. So through letters, you know, stuff like that, when I got back, she was waiting for me. Yeah, we got married. I still get emotional about it. She's not with me now. She passed away in 2020. But, yeah. So, you know, if you just look at all those sequences, if my father didn't ask me the question, none of this stuff would have happened. You know, Vietnam, training, whatever. It just makes you realize how, you know, how a little thing can change your life. And it did. For me.
The same assignment that brought Ken to his future wife also pointed him toward a career through one practical observation in the Vietnamese heat.
But the other positive thing about Vietnam was in my work area, there was one Quonset hut. You know, Quonset hut's one of those metal huts that's shaped like a half moon, you know. And it had an air conditioner on it. I'm saying to myself, who the heck are those guys? They'd have air conditioning. Meanwhile, we're sweating our ass off for everybody else. Turns out they were electronics technicians. So I said, okay. So when I got out of the Navy, that's what I did. I went to school for electronics. So after the service, August of 70 to August of 71 is when I served there. So I got out in August of 71, got married in May of 72, was going to school. A company, Control Data Institute. It was like a year's school, you know, for electronics. And so I went. Well, it was electronics school, learning about electronics. Once you finished your courses after a year, they'd actually arrange interviews for companies, you know, that were hiring. You start your career. So, yeah, worked out. For most of my life as a sales representative. So I went from fixing computers, working for somebody, a couple of different companies, getting into some telecommunications, then went to work for a guy selling electronics. Did that for a few years. Me and another guy were doing most of the business. We decided to leave, started our own company. And I had that company for almost 40 years. You know, and then after a while, me and this guy were doing most of the work, and we asked him, we said, "Hey, you know, how about some equity?" You know, because we're doing a lot of, he says, "Oh yeah, it's coming, it's coming." Well, it never came. So one Friday, we said, his name was Jack. We said, "Jack, we're gonna start our own thing." And we said, "Look, we'll stick around for a month to smooth things over, so that you know this won't be too disruptive for you." And he said, "No." He said, "Why don't we just cut the cord right now?" So we just looked at each other and said, "Oh shit." So we're outside and we said, "What do we do now? Let's meet Monday and figure out what to do." So we met for breakfast. We said, "We got to incorporate." We found a lawyer's office in Westwood. Just walked into the office, told him what we were doing. And he said, "Yeah, we can help you out." He said, "By the way, you got office space?" We said, "No." He said, "Well, There's 1,100 square feet available right upstairs, so we took it. The night before they came to interview us, my partner was at a bar, and he met this girl bartender, and he said, "Would you mind being a secretary for a day for us?" So she said, okay. So that day we had Motorola coming in to interview us, and we had our wives calling the secretary, pretending like they were customers. You know what I mean? So the phone was ringing, so they think we were busy. We ended up getting Motorola. We got our first commission check, I think it was August, it was $6,000. And we were running out of money. 10 years later, when we parted ways with Motorola, we were doing $140,000 a month. We had an organization, we had a distribution company, we had about 25 people total working for us and stuff like that. So it was quite a business. After 10 years, me and him split up. I took the rep company, just kept it small, and kept it going for another 30 years. And that's what I did up until like 2018. And, you know, I'm not complaining. I think I'm very, very lucky. I'm in pretty good financial shape. You know, losing my wife was tough those years, and it was a struggle. But things turned out okay. I got no complaints.
Ken built a marriage, a company, and a life after Vietnam. But leaving the country did not mean leaving it entirely behind.
You know, back in the day, when I was coming home from Vietnam, I was going through O'Hare Airport. And back then we had to travel in uniform so we'd get the military discounts on the plane. So going through O'Hare Airport, people were spitting at me and stuff like that, you know. I mean, it really sucked. Well, don't forget, you weren't a hero coming back. You were a baby killer, you know, supposedly. So that was kind of rough. It's like when I got home, I got rid of my uniform right away. I didn't want to wear it, you know. I just wanted to get rid of it. I think a lot of guys felt that way, you know. That would just, you know, the war was still raging on and stuff like that. You just want to bury it and just forget about it. And for a time, you got on with your life, and you did. But after a while, as the years go on, and now I'm 77 years old, and I think about Vietnam more now than I did, you know, when I was younger. I can't explain it, but it's there, you know. It's just a strange deal. But when I say to vets, the farther we are away from it, the closer it seems to be. They all get it, you know. I mean, they do. They understand what I'm talking about.
Dana Flynn, the friend who had entered the Navy with Ken, eventually drew him back toward another part of the story, only half a mile from where Ken had grown up. Post 440.
My friend Dana, he knew a lot of the people down here. Anyways, he started getting me down here. And, you know, we started coming down on a more regular basis. We're Golden Tee golf fanatics. But anyway, so we started coming down here and we started complaining about some things. And I said, look, we can't complain unless we get involved. So we got on the e-board, helping with decisions, the way things run and, you know, what have you. So that's how we got kind of involved. This place is like, it's important to me because without this place, I mean, I'm single right now. I don't want to sit around and do nothing all day. So this gives me something to do. I come down here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, usually playing on the golf machine for a couple of hours, get down here at 3 o'clock, leave at 6 or something like that. So when you get older, it becomes a little more challenging, I think, to, you know, keep busy and try to stay active. You know, yeah, you get to know people here, you get to know good friends and stuff like that, friendly atmosphere and stuff like that, so it's all good. Besides, I love to dance, so yeah, there's a thing tonight, you know, so, but it's good.
Ken's father asked one question. Ken gave one answer. That answer did not decide everything that followed. Ken still had to choose whether to go, what to learn, what to build, and whether to remain involved. But more than 50 years later, he can still point to the moment when the road divided.
Well, I mean, just him asking me the question, do you want me to see if he could do something for you? And I said, okay. If I said, nah, Dad, don't bother. You know what I mean? That was the crux of it right there. If I didn't say okay, who knows what would have happened.
Ken Incorvati served 4 years on active duty in the United States Navy, followed by 2 years in the inactive reserve. He served aboard the USS Terrebonne Parish and spent 1 year at the Naval Support Facility at Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam. After returning home, he built a long career in electronics and technical sales, and later became active on the executive board of American Legion Post 440. Thank you for listening to Veterans Voices of Newton. I'm Ethan Lee, a Newton North High School student preserving the stories of veterans in my community. And to Mr. Incorvati, thank you for your service, your candor, and for showing us that one answer can redirect a life without bringing that life to an end. To hear more stories, visit veteransvoicesofnewton.org.